If you think you're that good, fix it right now in front of all of us. Inside a sealed room on the 17th floor of Dharma, a top-secret defense contractor developing unmanned weapon systems for the government, a full-blown tech crisis was unfolding. The entire UAV control system had been down for 4 hours. 20 engineers, graduates from America's top universities, each earning six-figure salaries, sat helplessly before a glowing red screen flashing critical error codes. And then a black food delivery girl walked in, back still strapped with a thermal backpack, holding a bag of sandwiches in her hand. She glanced at the flickering error code on the central monitor and casually said something that froze the entire room. This error is coming from a cache conflict with the sandbox layer. You probably forgot to flush the transaction buffer before rebooting the system. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Then Drake Vanderhall, Dharma's CTO, son of the company's founder, notorious for his arrogance, scoffed. You just stepped off the elevator and think you're qualified to teach me? But 2 minutes later, the system was back online. Which raised one chilling question. Who was she? And why could a delivery girl do what an entire team of elite engineers couldn't? Not a sound. No keystrokes. No one dared to speak. All 20 engineers in the control room turned their heads toward the black girl with the delivery backpack still strapped to her shoulders. Their eyes were filled with a storm of emotions, confusion, discomfort, suspicion, and something else. Fear. Nova Carter stood still. She didn't step back. She didn't say another word. She didn't need to. The system had rebooted. The warnings were gone. The control interface was back to normal. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was the truth. And she had seen it in just 10 seconds. At the head of the table, Drake Vanderhall slowly walked forward, arms crossed. His eyes glinted with condescension, like he was speaking to a child who just touched a computer for the first time. You learned to code on TikTok or something? Or did you just grab a few lines from Google and think you're a genius now? Behind him, a few engineers chuckled. One muttered under his breath, "What's next? She gonna start a live stream tutorial right here?" But Nova didn't flinch. She just stood there, back straight. Not angry. Not scared. Only her eyes, calm, sharp as a blade, said everything that needed to be said. She knew she was right. And they knew it too. Drake didn't yell. He didn't slam the table. He didn't even send a warning email. He simply took out his phone. One message. One cold command. Full background check. She embarrassed me. 3 hours later, Nova Carter received her first notification. Her delivery account was temporarily suspended for inappropriate behavior toward a client. An hour after that, a second app sent an email terminating her contract. By evening, just as she finished cooking porridge for her mother, the third platform, the one she'd worked with the longest, deleted her profile entirely. No clear explanation. No appeal process. Just, we no longer require your services. At the same time, her mother, Mrs. Clarice, called the hospital to confirm her next treatment session. The insurance agent calmly informed her that her medical card had been invalidated due to suspected fraud in the sponsor's record. Nova collapsed when she heard those words. No one mentioned Drake's name. No trace pointed back to him. But Nova knew. When a powerful man's ego is wounded, his revenge doesn't come with whips or fists. It comes by erasing you from the map of society. Before she became the delivery girl, Nova had another name, the 17-year-old code prodigy. That was the headline on Tech Vision 3 years ago. She once wrote a security algorithm that won a national award. She'd received a full scholarship from MIT. She had even been invited to speak at a major conference on the future of artificial intelligence in Boston. But then, it all collapsed in a single week. Her mother, Mrs. Clarice, was a janitor at Dharma. One evening, security cameras captured her walking out of the server room with a USB in hand. No one checked what was on it. No one asked why. Drake Vanderhall, then the deputy director, made a swift declaration. Data breach, immediate expulsion, no negotiation. Within 24 hours, the media exploded with headlines. Mother of MIT prodigy accused of stealing military source code. Her scholarship was revoked. Sponsors withdrew. Nova was labeled a potential national security risk. She wasn't given a trial. There was no hearing. Only whispers, clickbait headlines, in the shadow of a poor mother that darkened her entire future. From prodigy to pariah. From pride to a whispered shame. And just like that, no one said her name again. After being wiped from every delivery app, Nova tried to rise again. She reprinted her resume, rewrote her CV, hid her past. All it said was, former freelance technical assistant. No mention of MIT. No mention of her mother. No mention of Dharma. She went from one tech startup to another across the city's outskirts. She knocked on doors, handed out her resume, smiled. And every time it was the same, that puzzled look from the recruiter as their eyes paused on the 2-year gap in her history. The 5th time, the man across the desk didn't bother sugarcoating it. Nova Carter? That name rings a bell. Wasn't there some scandal involving your mother, right? Nova clenched her hands under the table, but her voice remained calm. There was never a conviction, just a misunderstanding. The man leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, and let out a faint chuckle. We don't work off court rulings, Miss Nova. We work off trust. And in a technical environment, trust is everything. You understand that, right? She nodded, stood up, walked out of the office. She didn't cry, but for the first time in months, she felt hollow. It wasn't disappointment. It was something worse, the bitter realization that this world never gave her a chance to make things right, because it never truly believed she deserved one. The only sound in the room was the quiet spin of an old ceiling fan. Outside the window, rain had begun to tap gently on the glass. On the kitchen table lay an unpaid hospital bill. In the corner, her mother, Mrs. Clarice, was breathing heavily, still recovering from a dizzy spell caused by a painkiller reaction. Nova placed a cold towel on her mother's forehead. She gently wiped the endless beads of sweat from a body that had long run out of strength. Then she returned to her familiar little corner. Once her study room, her bedroom, and the only world where she was allowed to just be herself. On the floor sat a worn-out cardboard box. Inside, a cracked old laptop, 2 broken keys, her only companion during the sleepless nights of coding back in high school. Nova opened the lid. The screen lit up slowly. She launched a blank editor. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but something else. She typed the first line, Project Orbit. They won't let her into their system. Then she would build her own. No permission. No approval. No need for their belief. Outside, the rain turned into a storm. And inside that worn-down room, another kind of storm was forming. The laptop screen flickered dimly, casting a pale blue glow across Nova's face, where silent tears fell, blending with the frantic clatter of keystrokes, like a heartbeat pushed to its breaking point. She wrote, not to impress, not to be seen, but to survive. Each line of code was a shard of memory, Drake's condescending stare when she dared to speak up. The engineer's muffled laughter when she was erased from the system. That curt MIT letter stamped in red, scholarship revoked due to security concerns. Nova didn't fight back with words. She fought back with logic. Every time she saw his eyes in her mind, she added a new line of code. Every time her mother whimpered in her sleep, she inserted another bug detection algorithm. Every time she received another job rejection, she built a new system analysis module. Project Orbit wasn't just software. It was pain encoded. Tears translated into action. A scream unspoken yet echoing through every bit of data. Nova was staring at the screen when her inbox blinked. One new email. No subject line. No name. Just one short sentence. He ruined me too. I have proof he lied. There was a link. No explanation. No signature. Nova hesitated. She had learned not to trust anything that came too easily. But there was something in the tone, blunt, unsentimental, that made her click. Inside was a hastily clipped audio recording. Pin that error on security and dump it all on her. I don't care who she is. Alicia Moon? Fire her. Nova stopped breathing. That name, Alicia Moon, she remembered it well. Dharma's former chief of security. She had vanished from the industry after a single meeting. Nova pulled up the old records. Just as she recalled, Alicia had warned Drake about a vulnerability in the UAV signal routing system. 2 weeks later, she was charged with gross negligence causing potential operational damage. Nova replied with just one line. I'm listening. Send me everything you have. And that was the moment the fire of vengeance inside Nova roared to life. For the first time, she knew she wasn't alone. In an old kitchen, beside a rust-stained water filter and a fridge that clanked every time it powered on, Nova and Alicia sat face to face. One was the black girl once labeled a potential national security threat. The other, a former chief engineer cast out in silence for daring to speak the truth. Neither of them was a victim anymore. Not after today. Nova opened Project Orbit. Alicia laid out the tools, a string of internal IP addresses, the corporate network map, and a full list of Dharma's current defense clients. If we go public now, they'll spin the narrative, make us look like saboteurs, Alicia said. But if their top clients see the vulnerabilities themselves, they won't be able to stay silent. Nova nodded. Instead of striking the face, they would strike the heart, the one place Dharma never expected, the trust of its strategic partners. They began sending out detailed security reports, highlighting every critical flaw, from authentication loopholes, to encryption mismanagement, to potential manipulation of weapons control signals. Each email was signed with a single name, K-Orbit, no one in particular, but everyone who had ever been dismissed. And Dharma was starting to feel the tremors. One night, with her mother fast asleep and Alicia already gone, Nova remained hunched over the screen. She was scanning through a segment of code Dharma had quietly removed from last year's system update. Most of the data had been re-encrypted using proprietary algorithms, but Project Orbit was powerful enough to deconstruct it. And then she saw it. A small log entry labeled archived, but in reality intentionally buried. It recorded a signal misfire incident during a UAV trial flight, where a military drone nearly struck the wrong target, due to a routing error in the tactical guidance system. But the issue wasn't just the glitch. It was what happened next. Nova found clear traces that Drake himself had rewritten the entries, deleted the error logs from the event registry, and replaced them with a falsified report. Signal disruption due to weather interference resolved. Her heart pounded. This wasn't personal anymore. This wasn't revenge. If she was right, Drake wasn't just a smug, racist executive. He was a man who covered up a deadly weapons failure from the government. If this gets out, Dharma won't just lose contracts. They'll face a congressional investigation, Alicia said when Nova told her. Nova didn't respond right away. She just stared at the screen, watching the words flash over and over. Unauthorized log modification detected. This was no longer about vengeance. This was justice. And now it had a reason to explode. Monday, 4 a.m. Hundreds of emails were sent simultaneously from an encrypted address to defense corporations, military contractors, and strategic tech research units. Subject: security compromise in Dharma UAV system, urgent audit required. Sender: K-Orbit. Attached was a 43-page report detailing 27 unpatched security vulnerabilities, 9 modules failing encryption compliance, 1 near-miss UAV misfire due to system error, and most damning of all, a falsified log used to conceal the incident. No insults. No accusations. Just facts. Clear, time-stamped, source-backed. Within 6 hours, CEOs began placing emergency calls to Dharma. 8:15 a.m. An anonymous post appeared on a cybersecurity engineers forum. A flaw like this isn't an accident. This is organized deception. 10:40 a.m., Defense Weekly ran a headline. Who is K-Orbit, and why is Dharma refusing to answer the most critical question? 11:00 a.m., a Washington Post reporter reached out to Dharma and was met with no comment. This was no longer a technical issue. It had become a political bomb. And no one knew that the one who lit the fuse was a girl who once only wanted to keep her mother alive one more month. The conference room on Dharma's 22nd floor had never been this chaotic. 7 screens lit up with simultaneous video calls. 12 voices talking over one another, CEOs, national security advisors, defense officials, all demanding the same thing, an explanation. Drake Vanderhall sat at the head of the table, collar damp with sweat, gripping a cup of cold coffee. He had thought he'd extinguished the fire called Nova 3 years ago. But now that very name was burning his reputation to the ground. A Latin American CEO, face flushed with fury, slammed his hand on the table, voice like thunder. You told us your system was foolproof. But the report from K-Orbit shows 27 vulnerabilities, and at least one log entry was falsified. He leaned in toward the camera, eyes sharp. And now we find out she's the one who fixed the error you caused. Isn't that right? Nova Carter? No one spoke. No one laughed. Only the sterile light of the boardroom, shining down on Drake's pale, trembling face. He couldn't get a single word out. The name he once erased with power was now being spoken by the most powerful people in America. And this time, no one interrupted. The moment Nova Carter's name was spoken in the emergency meeting, Alicia Moon, sitting in a small cafe on the west side of the city, hit send. Seconds later, every major tech forum, cybersecurity private group, and several investigative journalists received the same file. The video was titled simply, Clarice Carter, The Battle No One Remembers. It was a security camera recording from Dharma, secretly backed up by Alicia before she was terminated. In the footage, Mrs. Clarice, Nova's mother, stands trembling before Drake Vanderhall in the surveillance room. A USB drive has fallen from her janitor's cart. She explains, I found it on the floor in the tech room. I was going to return it to the manager. Drake cuts her off. No checks, no questions. We don't keep thieves, escort her out. Alicia had added subtitles. The USB contained no data, nothing was leaked. The incident was never investigated. Within 30 minutes, the video hit over 1 million views. Hashtags began trending. Justice for Clarice. Remember Nova? One comment, shared more than any other, read, turns out she didn't fall. She was pushed. And we let it happen. The truth wasn't just exposed. It was resurrected at the exact right moment. And this time, it refused to be silenced. The main conference room at Dharma was flooded with lights and camera flashes. 3 TV crews. 15 journalists. Nearly 30 senior executives sitting in neat rows, silent. All eyes were fixed on the door, where Nova Carter had just walked in. No more delivery backpack. No more averted eyes. She wore a simple black button-up shirt, hair neatly tied back, a laptop in one hand and a thick folder of documents in the other. Drake Vanderhall sat at the head of the table, face drained of color. Behind him, his legal team, some with heads down, others typing furiously. None dared to look up. Nova opened her laptop and connected it to the large central screen. No introduction. The first slide appeared. Orbit findings, confidential audit. 27 unpatched system vulnerabilities. 8 security failures deliberately omitted from internal reports. 1 log documenting unauthorized data alteration related to UAV command systems. Then she looked up, right at Drake. Not with anger. Not with vengeance. Just the calm of someone who had nothing left to fear. I'm not a hacker. I'm not here to get you fired. I just fixed what you should have done right in the first place. No one deserves to be destroyed for telling the truth. The entire room stayed silent. No applause. No rebuttals. But no one looked at Drake again. Because the truth had just been projected. louder than any sound could ever be. Just 3 hours after the press confrontation, Dharma's board of directors held an emergency session. There was little debate. Drake Vanderhall was officially suspended from his position indefinitely. He exited the building through the back door, avoiding the media cameras, his once arrogant face now hollow, the look of a man defeated on his own turf. The next day, Dharma received emails from 14 defense partners, canceling all contracts for tech and security services. We cannot place trust in a system built by a company that knowingly concealed operational flaws. The lives of soldiers cannot be sacrificed to protect one man's ego. And that was just the beginning. On the third day, the U.S. Department of Justice formally announced a federal investigation into Dharma, centered on allegations of national security data fraud, concealment of technological warfare risks, and gross corporate misconduct. Nova never appeared at any press conferences. She didn't declare victory. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, the powerful had been shackled by the very tools they once used to silence others: information, influence, and silence. Drake didn't lose everything in one night. He lost it piece by piece, just as he had stripped away dignity, hope, and voice from so many others. Among those who stayed silent when Nova was publicly humiliated at Dharma, there was one person who should have spoken up the most: Marcus Reed, chief systems engineer, Black, originally from Chicago. The day Nova was blacklisted from every delivery platform, Marcus shook his head and muttered to a fellow engineer, "She was reckless. You can do anything. Just don't make us look bad in tech." He never openly sided with Drake, but he never stood with Nova either. But when the video of Clarice Carter's false accusation went viral, when the Orbit report laid bare the truth, when the same faces who once laughed now averted their eyes, Marcus couldn't sleep. For a week, he stared into the mirror and saw a kind of cowardice with his own name on it. Marcus resigned. At a public seminar at the National Institute of Technology, where Nova was speaking on equity in tech hiring, Marcus showed up, sat quietly in the last row until the event was nearly over. Then he stood. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I used to think you were making us look bad, but now I see you were trying to save us. Not by staying quiet to keep them comfortable, but by speaking up, to remind us that we deserve better." Nova didn't respond. She simply nodded. Because sometimes, a real apology doesn't need many words, just the right moment. The main hall of the National Tech Conference was packed. Stage lights glowed like a red carpet, but in the third row, where no spotlight reached, a woman sat quietly in a wheelchair, hands clasped, eyes shimmering as she looked toward the stage. Mrs. Clarice Carter. The woman once labeled a janitor who stole classified data, the one who had been dismissed from Dharma without a single chance to explain, the one who had quietly mopped the hallways to raise a daughter who dared to study tech. And now, among thousands of engineers, founders, and CEOs of the world's top firms, her daughter stood center stage as the keynote speaker of the conference. Nova walked out. No script. No papers in hand. She looked down toward the third row, nodded gently, then spoke. 3 years ago, my mother was called a thief, and I, the daughter of that woman, was labeled a security threat. But the truth is, my mother didn't steal data. She just cleaned up what the powerful tried to bury. The entire auditorium fell silent. No applause. Just a reverent stillness, a deeper kind of respect than any standing ovation. Clarice wiped away her tears. "They once called me a thief," she whispered. "Now, the whole industry has to say your name." From someone cast out, Nova had made an entire industry stop and listen. And the forgotten mother had become the witness to a resurrection. Nova didn't buy a supercar. She didn't post photo bragging about her victory. She simply, quietly founded a company, Orion Systems, with one clear mission: to hire those who had been underestimated. Women pushed out of boardrooms. People of color told to step back. Engineers fired for daring to disagree with the white men in charge. Not a startup, but a living manifesto, not for revenge, but for reinvention. Whenever reporters asked, "Did you create Orion to get back at Drake Vanderhall?" Nova would simply smile and answer with a line that silenced every microphone. Winning isn't about making them hurt. It's about making them realize they were never big enough to bury us. Under the roof of Orion Systems, those once rejected were now respected. Ideas once mocked were now funded. Dreams once locked behind the fences of bias were now free to grow. Because Nova knew, what we need to build is not a grave for the past, but a home for what was never allowed to exist. 1 year later, Drake Vanderhall was spotted in a rundown cafe on the city's outskirts, sitting alone, dodging camera lenses, like sunlight he could no longer bear. He was once the man who pulled strings in national defense. Now he was a shadow of himself. Dharma, once a legendary tech titan, was no longer mentioned as a symbol of innovation, but as a moral cautionary tale. And on the front page of the Washington Post, a headline shook the entire tech world. An entire corporation was brought down by a food delivery girl. And it was necessary. Cybersecurity experts, sociologists, Ivy League professors all agreed. Nova Carter didn't just fix a broken system. She rewrote the very definition of who deserves to be trusted. Not the white man in the tailored suit. Not the one holding an MIT degree. Not the one giving orders behind closed doors. But the one who dares to speak the truth, even if it cost her everything. Nova Carter didn't destroy Drake. He self-destructed, fed by the same flawed pride the system once rewarded. And what followed was a lasting resonance in every door that reopened, in every voice once silenced, now rising, in every person who once felt small, now standing with different eyes, and in the hearts of those watching, where they suddenly understood, every time we're underestimated might just be the moment we're about to rewrite the rules.